All right, everyone. Welcome to today's Q&A session. This will be a full 60 minutes of Q&A, assuming we have enough questions to keep going that long. We've already got a few questions here in the Q&A box. For those of you who might be watching through Facebook Live, I will get to your questions as time allows. The people who are attending with me here in Zoom get first priority. So those of you here in Zoom, please put your questions into the box. I will take them basically in the order that I see them, although I will pay attention to questions that are upvoted and look at those more quickly. So without further ado, I'm going to get to the first question, which is from Valerie. Valerie says, I had an agent approach me in spring 2019. She didn't want to sign a contract until she shopped my memoir around, which she did at that time. 6 houses had positive responses, but passed because they felt my platform wasn't strong enough. After about 18 months, the agent tried to persuade me to publish at my own cost through the company she had just started. And at that point, I decided to end the relationship and we amicably parted ways. So Valerie's question is, since the project has already been shopped around, does she mention this experience in the query to new agents or wait until they express interest? If an agent is excited about a project, am I naive in thinking they should offer suggestions in helping build my platform? Whew. Okay, so there's a few answers in here. I think first I would like to say that I think you were right, probably, to walk away from that agent if she was persuading you to publish through the company she had just started. That sounds a little odd, not wrong, but if she had just started the company, I don't know how great of a job she might have done on the book. Who knows? So if you're querying new agents, I don't know that you have to get into great detail about what has happened with the project, but I do think you need to, at least in a sentence, indicate it's been represented before and it's been turned down from some places. You don't necessarily have to list what they are, but here's the problem that you face. Most agents are not crazy about taking on a project that's already been represented and shopped around, probably to all of the places they would ordinarily go themselves. I have to assume that the agent you had did a reasonable job in covering all their bases and going to all the places that might take it. So once it's a rejection from a publisher or an editor, pretty much always a rejection. A new agent isn't going to change the fortunes of the project with that publisher. So what you're banking on here is a new agent having new ideas or new places to go that the former agent didn't think of or didn't have access to. Obviously, I don't know who this first agent was and how diligent or thorough they might have been, but you're in a really difficult position. And if it were me, I would probably be thinking about approaching publishers on my own rather than finding an agent whose enthusiasm will definitely be dampened because it's already been repped and it's already gone out on submission. So the next piece of the question, if an agent's excited about the project, am I naive in thinking they should offer suggestions in helping build platform? I mean, they might have a conversation with you about that. But and by conversation, I mean, they might mention it in a half-hour phone call or in a 1-hour phone call and suggest what needs to happen, but they're not going to give you hands-on help. They're probably not going to do a lot of heavy lifting there. They might brainstorm with you, and then you go back to them in 6 months or 12 months or however long it takes you to execute some sort of platform building activity. So I hope that helps, Valerie. I think my bottom line here is that I'm not sure going down the agent path is going to be terribly fruitful, especially since you've already had a round of rejections. I would be thinking about small publishers, independent publishers that you could approach on your own that don't require an agent as, if not your next step, the next step after you try another round of agents, if you feel like that first one didn't go to enough places to begin with. And if you haven't already figured it out or asked or whatever, you need to get a list of the places that first agent went to so that the next agent has that on hand. That's one of the first things they're going to ask for is, where has this book already been shopped? Because they don't want to knock on the door a second time. Okay, so next question is from Wendy. What type of email program or system do you recommend for connecting with readers? This can be a pretty personal decision. There's not one size fits all here. I'll mention the ones that are most popular with authors and why they're popular with authors. Right now, Substack is getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, because it's very writer friendly. It attracts a lot of journalists and nonfiction writers, but people from all categories and genres. It's easy to figure out. You don't have to pay for it, and there's the possibility of charging people for your email newsletter down the road. So for that reason, a lot of people are trying out Substack. It's pretty low risk, but it's very writing driven, which may or may not be appealing. There's not a whole lot of design flexibility. It's not as fully featured or as, let's say, as advanced from a marketing perspective as something like a MailChimp, which I have a lot of experience with, or like a MailerLite, which is one of the popular email marketing services that authors use. So if you want something that is more marketing oriented, I would look at MailerLite as probably your first stop. I believe it's free up until 1,000 names. You could also look at MailChimp, although I've pulled back myself from that service. It's more expensive. I think it's really more for small businesses at this point. And then who else? I think those are the top choices. There are definitely others out there, but like I said, it's a personal decision. Maybe I'll give a shout out to ConvertKit as something that is pretty sophisticated and also, I think, pretty easy for authors to use, that is more marketing oriented. So if you're looking for a more heavy duty marketing email service, ConvertKit might be the way to go for you. Tom says, I've published 9 novels with imprints of Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster, and written for Spawn at Image Comics. I've had 4 agents, only 3 of whom sold of anything. My last novel came out in 2018, and no agent in about that long. I've just had an agent say she can't rep me because I have since then published indie books, self-published, I assume, and they didn't sell well enough. Is my career just over? What are my options? I don't think your career is over. I don't always trust the reasons agents give for what's happening in terms of why they can't represent you, unless you have actual rejection letters from houses or editors. I think their thinking is informed by lots of subjective factors, how they like to operate, the sorts of clients they have. I'm not saying this agent was misleading you exactly, but they're going to give you an answer that is the easiest possible answer to give without sometimes not a lot of nuance. So there may be a sales track record issue here, maybe, but I think it would really pertain more to the traditionally published books and not the self-published books. I think most agents and publishers are thoughtful enough to be able to distinguish between the commercial fortunes of those 2 types of publishing, and they wouldn't equate one with the other. That said, if you did these self-published books and they look, I don't know, they look subpar, or they just raise flags for some reason, I don't know why that might be, but who knows, that might not be helping you at the very least. But I'm reluctant to say that just because you self-published, no agent's going to touch you, because I see self-published authors picked up all the time with new books. So if you're trying to pitch them on stuff that's self-published, that's a problem. You have to be going to them with new titles that have not yet hit the market. So I wouldn't give up. But some authors will decide to adopt a pen name or try to tackle this in a creative way that diverts attention from whatever seems to be dampening their chances. But I don't take one agent's opinion on this as gospel. I would keep looking either for representation as long as it's a new project, or look for independent publishers or small publishers that don't require an agent. Carol asks, can you talk about the advantages and disadvantages of setting up a book for pre-order when you self-publish versus just making it available without a pre-order? I think the big disadvantage is that if you have a really long pre-order period on Amazon specifically, you're spreading out those sales over many weeks or even many months. You can set a pre-order up a year in advance. So if you have pre-orders trickling in for an entire year, you're kind of losing that really great punch of sales that happen when you have a tighter pre-order window. Now, I'm not going to talk about traditional publishing strategy. I'm just going to focus on self-published authors here. But for most self-published authors, sustaining strong pre-order sales week after week and month after month, if it's a full year, can be challenging. So usually you want to keep that pre-order window less than a month. And that's if you have an established readership that you can market and promote to. If it's your very first book, it can be hard to market a pre-order because you might not have an established audience yet. You might not really have much of an email newsletter or social media presence. You might not know what you're doing. And so it's harder to get those pre-orders going. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you would have to know how to light that fire and keep it going over a period of weeks. So if you are doing meaningful pre-publication marketing, so that would include, getting blurbs, pre-publication reviews, doing pre-publication advertising, having a cover reveal, doing these things that generate interest over weeks and months, then the pre-order can be okay, and it works out fine. But again, if you are looking for a really nice shot in the arm when your book first releases, you might want to consider having a small pre-order or not having a pre-order so that you get that sales juice. The Amazon algorithm, recognizes the sales coming in and all hits, and you get the big boost in your ranking rather than having it kind of spit out over many, 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 many days. So I hope that makes sense. I was here focusing on Amazon as a pre-order vehicle. The same does not apply for other retailers like Barnes & Noble, the Nook, Kobo, Apple. They all count pre-orders on the day of release. So it's a little bit of a different game. So another factor that plays into this is whether you're exclusive with Amazon or if you're wide. There's a really good post at my site by Penny Sansevieri that talks specifically about pre-order strategy. I would highly recommend taking a look at that post and reading through some of her suggestions. My perspective on the issue is similar to hers. Marissa says, you've said a query is more effective if we write specifics that no other writer would use. But what if we're trying to quickly build suspense with phrases like until now, or but appearances can be deceiving, or but she was far from safe, or she refused? How can a writer build suspense in the short space of a query otherwise? Well, I think there's a difference here between transition phrases, which of course are going to be repeated across queries, and then big abstract concepts or stakes that tend to get repeated again and again, cliches. So things like appearances can be deceiving. I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've seen that expressed in a query. Now, it might be fine in your query, but it has to be buttressed or complemented by what appearances we're talking about and what the deception is. If you just use it in an abstract, high concept way without any specifics, we don't care as much. It's the story comes alive through specific characters facing specific challenges. So there are some things where, because you need to condense to save space, that you're going to repeat some phrases that are common, especially in transitions or to get something across very quickly. But always make sure the story specifics are there along with it when you're using some of those well-worn phrases. Another one of the well-worn phrases is, her life was turned upside down. Or she had to choose between, saving her own life or saving her loved ones. Some of these are just, they fall flat because they get used so often. So I'm trying to help, when I advise writers on queries, I'm trying to help them avoid the things that make their story sound like everyone else's story. So there's Sonia's asking a question that I've been receiving quite a bit of lately. Apple has recently announced that they're going to block email open tracking. So can I address how this will affect authors and newsletter writers? So for those who aren't aware, in the land of email newsletters and email marketing, one of the metrics or one of the things that you can see about your email is how often people open, and it's expressed as a percentage rate. So you have a 20% open rate or a 50% open rate. And it's a really good sign of how well that email has performed. Of course, if you have a better open rate, something was going really well with that email subject line or something about when the email was delivered. So with Apple deciding to no longer make that information available, it sort of creates a big blind spot. And I think the number one concern for most people is that it limits your ability to keep a healthy or cleaner list because you don't have the most accurate idea of who's opening your emails. So in other words, if you try to clean your list based on people who aren't opening, it's going to be really hard to do that when the metrics aren't accurate or they don't tell you who is actually opening. Now, I have to add here a huge caveat that open rates are already not accurate. It's an approximation. It does not offer pinpoint accuracy already, but it's going to get a lot worse when Apple stops reporting these metrics. So I think there are going to be other methods that come around for helping with that clean, healthy list. I think people are going to be looking a lot more at click-based engagement. There'll probably be more emails asking people what they want to receive that require clicking. And I think they'll just, other things will happen. I think we're going to see this evolve where people will adapt and adjust. One of the things here is that it's simply too early to know how this is going to play out. I mean, it was just announced like a couple weeks ago, if not even, maybe not even that long ago. No one's exactly sure how Apple is implementing this or what it will look like. So I think it's still, how this is going to play out is anyone's guess. It's pure speculation at this point. But I think for most writers who, they're not hard marketers sending emails that are meant to sell every time, I think the effect is going to be less pernicious. But the one area where I think it's going to hurt most is in being able to maintain a list that you can tell is engaged because of the open rate. But I don't think it's going to be a nail in the coffin, or I don't think it's going to result in tragedy. Everyone will adapt because we always adapt, and everything's okay in the end. Carol Sue says, recently you wrote about a voice to print or vice versa app. Can you tell me again what it is? Probably Otter, if I had to guess. Otter is a service that allows you to take, for instance, a Zoom audio recording and turn it into text. Otter, in fact, powers the captions for this. So it might be that. There's also rev.com. So those are the first two tools that come to mind. Mary Jane says, I'm brand new to all of this and have finished my first draft of my memoir. I expect this to be my one and only book that I will try to get published, and it needs to be under a pen name per my family's request. What would be the typical upfront costs of trying to self-publish, of getting the cover designed, using a designer to make my Word document feasible for publication? I'm trying to keep out-of-pocket expenses to a minimum. So, for most people, if they're tackling self-publishing as something that's, let's say, professional grade, the expenses can easily get up to $5,000 if you're hiring a professional editor and a professional designer. I think the big question mark here is the editorial piece, because a traditional publisher will use no fewer than 3 editors in most cases to go through that work. They'll have a development or content editor, a copy editor, and a proofreader. It gets very expensive very quickly when you're an author hiring out those services for each stage of the process. So a lot of people will use one editor a little bit later in the process, and or maybe combined with some betas, and that'll be that. With the design, there are tools that keep those costs in line. So for example, there's Joel Friedlander's book design templates. You could go to bookdesigntemplates.com and for less than $100, get something that turns your Microsoft Word document into both an ebook and to a printer-ready PDF that you can upload to Amazon and Ingramspark. So I would look for book design templates from Joel Friedlander. That will get you the interior for your print and your ebook, although it won't get you the cover. There's also Amazon's own tools that will create the book for you. It might look a little clunkier than it would if you paid for Joel Friedlander's templates. There's also a service by Damon Za, that's spelled Z-A. If you go to damonza.com, you can find that he has a range of packages for self-published authors that give you the cover design and the interior design for both the ebook and the print book. Last time I checked, those costs were less than $1,000. So if you're going to make an investment in design, I would focus it on the cover design. That's by far the most important piece here. The interior design can often be template driven, whether that's from Joel Friedlander's templates, Amazon's templates, or just following someone's directions on how to format your Word document. So I hope that helps, Mary Jane. Maddie says, I'm trying to get Google Play promo codes into the hands of readers in exchange for their sign up for my email newsletter. I'm not, and the tools at her disposal are MailChimp, a Weebly site, Facebook, BookFunnel. I'm not sure how to combine these most efficiently to achieve my goal. And I suspect I'll need to use several of these in combination. And I'm having trouble finding advice on how to execute the entire process from anyone's source. I am probably going to disappoint you, Maddie, because I don't know. I mean, my inclination is to back way up, in fact, and ask why Google Play, because it represents such a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of overall sales. I would want to know a lot more about the reasons for focusing on those readers, what's going to be gained, especially if you're not quite sure how to execute. It seems like a lot of work and effort and question mark for a market that I know is incredibly small. So I don't mean to be dismissive of the question, but boy, whenever I see that sort of big question mark surrounding something, I have to ask if it's actually going to be meaningful if you manage to execute it. So there are bigger, more fruitful areas maybe to explore. I really don't know where I would start in trying to accomplish this. I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer. David asks, do you think Amazon advertising or bedside reading in the Hamptons marketing programs are worth investing in? I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the Hamptons program, so I'll leave that unanswered. But for self-published authors and traditional publishers, Amazon ads are becoming something of a necessity. And that's mainly to get better ranking in Amazon through search and to ensure a higher baseline of sales over the long term. That said, Amazon ads, have to be monitored. It's not just something you can set once and forget. It's something you're going to need to revisit on a weekly basis, or you'll have to consider doing short-term campaigns periodically, perhaps in conjunction with other promotions. Like you might be advertising somewhere else, like on BookBub or Facebook, or you can do them in isolation, or you can do them in conjunction with something else, or both. So I do think Amazon advertising is becoming pretty important broadly for all types of authors and publishers. Harshita asks, my debut paperback comes out spring next year. From your experience, what are some things I need to start doing now for a successful launch and sales? Well, without knowing a lot more about what sort of book this is, who the publisher is, if you're self-publishing, et cetera. Lots of considerations here. I'll try to mention the things that I would expect from any professional author. So you usually start with an author website. If you don't have one, it's time to start one. I would think about the email newsletter that's going to help capture the readers that you get from this book. And so you can market to them again for your second book. So always be thinking ahead in that regard. And then one social media outlet where you're okay or even eager to be engaging with other people in your genre or in your community. So I don't like to be prescriptive here because it needs to be something you can participate in over the long term in order to see any kind of meaning or payoff. So you have to actually enjoy what you're doing. So it could be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's up to you, but I think one place for you to be visible and active is very useful for a launch. So that's kind of the what I call the marketing trifecta when we're thinking about book launches in the online space. Tricia says, I plan to release a series of 5 YA books beginning this summer. I'm working on the rate of release, weighing the pros and cons of releasing 30, 60, 90, and 120 days apart. On the one hand, I might reap some advantages from the rapid release. So rapid release, for those who don't know, is a term that authors use about rapidly releasing their books, usually within a month of each other. On the other hand, I don't want to forgo the benefits of allowing time to garner reviews and publicity. So I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer here. Again, there's so many variables with marketing books, not least of which is your own platform, any prior books you might have on the market, what else is happening in your category or genre, what the readers expect. These are things that I myself would have to research in order to come up with an educated answer. So I don't know, but the one reassurance I can offer you is that if this is fiction, and it certainly sounds like it is, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. Usually the rapid release is to help you with the Amazon algorithms and helping gain traction in that particular environment. If you have a wide strategy and a very long-term organic strategy, then you're going to be marketing and promoting these books for years to come. And then hopefully publishing more books. And as that library of titles behind you grows, it's going to become easier and easier to market and promote. So if these are the very first books that you're doing, you're at the beginning of a pretty long journey. And I don't know, which choice you make, I don't think is going to have an effect that you can't change or overcome or build on, regardless of what happens. So don't, I think sometimes when we approach these things, we think there's the right way to do it that will ensure success coming out of it. But I think you'll just have to evaluate and decide from book to book if you're going to keep on with the same strategies. So pay attention to what happens and be willing to change course if you see things are playing out differently than you expected. Being flexible, essentially, is what I'm suggesting. I hope that helps. Walter says, my first novel came in at 134,000 words. I'm researching and submitting to prospective agents. I've received a caveat that 134,000 may kick my crime novel out of the box right away. Am I killing the book because of the word count? One person said there are books published out of the range, but rarely first novels. Walter says, I like the novel, but if I've already killed it, then I wonder if I shouldn't go back and do surgery now before I submit it. So yes, 134,000 words is long indeed. And you will increase your chances if you cut it. I can't lie. And I know that, there are many publishers and agents as well who can point to exceptions to this rule. I just don't suggest counting on yourself as that exception. So yes, can you get it down even by 10%, 15%? Getting it closer to that 100,000 mark, I think would be helpful. And you may sometimes just going through that editing exercise actually shows you some things maybe you didn't realize at first about that novel. Usually tightening things up, it makes things stronger. So be open to that if you can. If you try to cut it or tighten it and it seems worse, then submit it at the full length. But I think it's at least worth trying to cut. We have someone anonymously asking a question. 2 agents on a well-known podcast prefer the narrative and memoir queries to be written in third-person present tense. I know it's usually written in first tense, past tense. And this person tried third-person present, believes it sounds better. So should I use this POV for all queries? I mean, I'll say for fiction, I do like present tense without a question for both the query and the synopsis. For memoirs, I tend to my personal preference is past tense, but a lot depends on the context. I think it gets awkward when you're pitching a memoir and it's stuff that happened 50 years ago or many decades ago. It just starts to feel a little weird. But it's not wrong to write it in first. So I think you should do what you think fits the story best and what seems more natural. Beatrice says, a high-profile agent asked for my manuscript, was complimentary about the writing, but eventually passed. Since then, I've tightened it up and will be ready to shop it again soon. Can I resubmit to this agent or another at the agency? And if so, should I tell them it's been there before? Every agency has a different policy on this. So at some agencies, you can query to every single agent. At others, if you query one person at the agency, it's in essence querying all agents at the agency because they share projects amongst each other. So a rejection from one is a rejection from all. So you're going to have to take a look at what that agency says on the matter. If they say absolutely nothing about it, then I would assume you can submit to other agents at that agency. As far as resubmitting to the exact same agent, unless they asked for a revise and resubmit, they do not want to see it again. I mean, you can try and you're not going to get a black check or X next to your name, but it's going to be no. If they felt like the manuscript or the project was worth them seeing again after revision, they would have said so. So I would take it as a no and move on. Another anonymous question, what are the best self-publishing and small publishing companies? You keep mentioning them. So for clarity here, I'm talking about traditional publishers who are not the big 5. So there are 5 really large New York publishers, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Hachette, Macmillan. And under those big 5 are hundreds of imprints, which you really can't approach without an agent. But outside of the big 5 in New York, there are hundreds, thousands of small publishers, independent publishers, university publishers, publishers that are actually really notable in size, that make millions of dollars in sales every year and are open to authors without an agent. So those are the publishers I'm referring to. I am not referring to self-publishing. I'm not referring to hybrid. I'm referring to traditional publishers outside of the conglomerate model. So if you're curious about what those companies are, there are far too many thousands for me to name. You have to look at a database like duotrope.com in order to figure out which of those companies would be appropriate for your work. And good news, I just learned that Writer's Market, that's one of the brands I used to work for, is actually coming back this year, the big directory of agents and publishers and all the rest of it. It's now published by Penguin Random House, one of the big 5, and they're coming out with a new edition late this year. So you'll be able to also reference that to find out who all those other publishers are. Tricia says, for an upcoming release, I've been accepted to receive a new release for less feature from BookBub. Are there other new release promotion sites I should look into? Off the top of my head, I know that BookBub allows you, I think, to purchase an alert I think, if I'm not mistaken, that tells your BookBub followers that you have a new release coming out, although you may have to have like a minimum of 1,000 people maybe following you on BookBub to take advantage of that promotion. So that's one I would look at. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any others except maybe Written Word Media. I think they have a new release newsletter as well that would be very comparable to BookBub's. Emma Lombard recently wrote at my site about her book launch plan as a self-publishing author, and she used the Written Word Media new releases promotion, but she mentions that she wouldn't use it again. So it didn't work for her. It might work for you, but I would be cautious about new release alerts for self-publishing titles, not because I think it's bad, but I just, like Emma Lombard found out with her promotion, I find that the fact that your book is a new release isn't often what sells it, unless you're a known name or a known author. Trisha adds on to that, I'm wondering whether I should set up Amazon ads for release week, in addition to the BookBub ad and Facebook, or wait. If you were trying to get on a bestseller list or something and you were doing a really strong push, I could see having an ad campaign on Facebook or Amazon. But I think, I would be looking at the long game here of where you want to put your advertising dollars and who you're hoping to reach. The other piece of this is, before you advertise, you need to know two things. One, that everything about that book is positioned and packaged well. And by position and packaging, I mean cover design, title, price, marketing copy. And sometimes when you launch something, you realize belatedly that something is off about that, and you have to go back and fix it. So sometimes you figure that out because of advertising, actually, because you're doing ads and you realize the ads aren't performing that well, and there's something off about the package or the position, and then you have to fix it and the ads perform better. The other piece of this is ad testing. I don't know that a lot of people are testing their ads as much as they need to in order for the ads to be effective. So especially with Facebook and Amazon, it requires testing and maintenance over months, if not years. So I'm always a little hesitant to suggest ads if you're doing it as a one-time thing and you haven't been doing it all along. It's the first time you've ever advertised. It's, this is part of a bigger picture, right? So there are a lot, I keep stressing this, there are a lot of variables to consider in figuring out whether advertising is going to be effective. It has to be one piece of a much bigger plan. So I'm not trying to be wishy-washy. Ads are important, but I hope that when you're doing them, it's that you're doing the testing and that you also have got your position and your packaging correct. Okay. Someone says on Query Shark, I read that sentences in a query should be kept short, under 10 words each. Do you agree? No, I don't agree. Make your sentences as long as you want. Kathy says, as a novelist whose work in progress is set in a fictional small town inspired by my own adopted hometown, is the normal disclaimer okay, especially if no one is a character from the town? If my fictional town has a florist shop, not the name of the real one, for example, is this problematic? I think people write fiction all the time that's based on people they know, places they lived. I think most publishers and authors put something that's, on the copyright page or otherwise that says, all this story is fictional, nothing's that, seems like it's, I can't remember the exact language, but yes, the normal disclaimer is fine, I guess, is what I would say. I'm not even sure often that you need that disclaimer in the first place, but yes, the normal one is fine. Another anonymous question. I have some essays based on chapters in my book and others. Would it be better to try to publish these before querying for agents and editors to see, or closer to my publication date to garner reader interest? Both and. If I'm assuming this is a nonfiction book and you will likely need a platform of some kind, It's hard to get a nonfiction book published without some sort of publishing track record in nonfiction. So I would say, yes, definitely start placing some work if you can. And then closer to the release date, you're going to be working with your publisher to get excerpts or essays or guest posts published. So yeah, both. Another question from Maddie with a different spin on the promo code question, since I gave a very non-answers before. Does giving away a promo code for a free copy of a book on a non-Amazon platform violate Amazon's lowest cost rule? No, as long as the list price is the same as Amazon's list price. So let's say this comes into play with Smashwords, for example. So Smashwords acts as both the ebook distributor and retailer, and they offer promo codes. So Smashwords will, you may have your ebook listed there for $3.99, and you're also selling it for $3.99 on Amazon, but you're giving people a promo code that effectively reduces the price to 99 cents or free or what have you. Does not violate Amazon's terms of service or the fact that they demand to have the lowest price on the market. Anne says, I have a self-published book for which I filled out forms for Ingramspark. How does this agency assist with distribution, and how is the author's position or duty related? So Ingramspark is a distributor that serves specifically self-published authors. It's part of a much larger wholesaler and distributor that's one of the biggest in the world, Ingram. Big publishers use Ingram. Amazon orders from Ingram. Bookstores and retailers and libraries order from Ingram. Everyone basically orders from Ingram. So by having your book in the Ingram system or catalog, it makes your book available to be purchased or ordered from basically any bookseller or retailer that sells books. So the fact that you're in the system is all that you really need here. Your book will then populate at retailers across the globe without you having to do anything. So for instance, if you go to the Powell's bookstore website and you look up your book, you'll see it there. If you go to Bookshop, which is an independent bookstore online retailer, you'll find your book there if it's an Ingram. So the service just works. You don't have to do anything aside from upload your book for it to be distributed. Karen says, I'm self-publishing right now and think a publisher might republish it. What should I do to bring that about? So I do have a blog post at my website about how to find an agent for a self-published book. The same advice applies if you're trying to look for a publisher for it. It is really, really hard to find a publisher to republish a self-published book. If they're interested, they will approach you. They won't wait for you to reach out to them. They will have noticed your book selling well in their category. They would have seen its numbers on NPD BookScan. You would have made waves in some way that makes them aware your book exists, and they will email you or reach out in some way. If you have to reach out to them, you're going to have to make a sales case that this book really belongs in their catalog and there's more money to be made than you've already made on it. And that can be a really difficult case to make. So you're going to have to, if it's a nonfiction book, you're going to have to write a book proposal. If it's a novel or a memoir, you're going to have to write a query and then disclose the sales history in the query or in the proposal. So the submissions process is the same as if you had an unpublished work. You still have to prepare your submissions materials. You can't just send the book and have them make a decision. You need to pitch it. All right. Camille says, I recently attended a conference where an agent spoke about the requirements for publishing memoir. I was glad that what he said contradicted what I'd heard before. He said a memoirist can pitch with an incomplete memoir. He talked about needing a platform, not necessarily a social media platform, but something. And what do you think? Can you pitch in the process of writing the memoir? And what about people who don't really have a platform? So let me very simplistically divide memoirs into two groups, just for the purposes of answering this question, because there is a lot of contradictory advice out there. There's one group of memoirists who are influencers, have big platforms, maybe they're celebrities, they have name recognition, they've been in the news, Whatever it is, they've got people who know their name and are following them. Those people can sell a memoir on the basis of a sample or a partial or a proposal because they have a platform. I think that's who the agent was probably thinking of when he suggested that. Then there's another category of memoirists who are, let's say, like me, average, ordinary people. Yes, I have a following, but it's not for memoir. I really need to have the finished manuscript because I have not proven myself, really, and I don't have a platform for writing and selling a memoir. So especially if you are totally unpublished, if you have very little or no track record as a published writer, if your memoir is your first book, if you don't have any kind of online following, if you don't have demand for the book, I would finish that book to prove that you can do it successfully. And I think it's necessary too for you as a writer to know how you're going to finish that book out. Some people get to the end and they realize that's not actually the end. So there's a lot of revision that comes into play with any sort of creative work like memoir or novels. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to have it finished. It has to be fully baked before the agent or publisher is going to feel confident, unless, like I said, you've already got that following that's just demanding the book now. So I hope that helps clarify why there's contradictory information about how memoirs get sold, or what agents are looking for. It's all over the map. Some people want the full manuscript, some want the full proposal, and I think a lot of it depends on who you are and if you already are commanding an audience that wants the book. Amy says she is seeking a reality check. So she signed a book contract that gives the publisher rights to make any and all changes to the manuscript without her permission. Dumb, I know. Is this common? The publisher made disastrous heavy-handed edits, including writing whole scenes without her approval. She's not seeking legal advice here. She is getting that elsewhere. She just wants to know that she is not the only one in a situation like this, and it's been a hard lesson learned. Very sorry to hear this. It is pretty common boilerplate contract language for the publisher to say somewhere in there that they don't have to ask for your approval over changes and that they can insert material without your approval. Now, any agent who looks at that sort of contract, that's one of the first things they're going to modify. They would not allow, and a good agent would not allow one of their clients to sign that sort of language because it results in disastrous things, as you've noticed. I worked for a publisher with a contract that had that language, exactly that language. And I feel bad that we had authors sign it, but you're really then relying on the goodwill of the editor or publisher you're working with, not to take advantage of that clause and do something that you really hate. So you're not alone. But if you had an agent, I would hope they would have negotiated that clause to say something better. So usually there's, you strike all of that stuff and you say that the publisher can only make changes that would be related to style, grammar, consistency, like actual errors, things that don't like it would, that's part of their job, like to fix grammar and errors and things like that. But they can't make those changes without having you at least look and usually approve. And certainly you should never have to allow them to make changes to content that you don't agree with. There are some contracts that even say the publisher has the right to hire another author or person to finish the book for you and pay them out of the proceeds or take that money, put it against your advance, so pay it out of the proceeds of the book. So that's even adds more insult to injury that you have to pay for that other person to do the work. I hope that's not in your contract too. So I guess I don't know if that's probably good news, bad news sort of answer. So you're not alone. Jake says, any advice if you were banned from Facebook ads and don't know why? Jake asked for a review and received the same automated response, ran the same exact ad 5 times with no issues, and was banned the 6th. I wish I could tell you, Jake. I don't know. I know that there are authors groups on Facebook that complain about this frequently. I think experts in the area have also complained, like David Gogren, I think, is another one who's run into this sort of behavior. So I don't know what to tell you, although I can say if you were advertising something of like in romance or erotica, sometimes the imagery runs afoul of Facebook guidelines, but it's hard for me to say unless I saw the ad. As Sonia says, do you think you need to have an ebook in Ingramspark also? So this goes back to the discussion we were having about Ingramspark as the biggest distributor in the world, definitely in the US, if not the world. I don't recommend Ingramspark for ebook distribution because I think there are other providers of ebook distribution that do just as good a job and pay you more. So Draft to Digital and Smashwords are two examples of companies that pay you, I think it's 85% net, while I believe Ingramspark pays like what, 55% net or something like that. It's really low in comparison. So from a financial perspective, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to use Ingramspark for ebook distribution. I would use one of those other companies. Melissa says, I've heard many people use Draft to Digital for wide distribution for ebooks and Ingram for print only. And would you recommend this strategy for fiction? Yes, just to confirm, that's exactly what I would do. Susan says, I prefer not to use Amazon to sell my book. How can I sell from my own website? Is that a real possibility? It is a possibility, but you are basically accepting a lot lower sales. You could use Shopify to help you do that. You could use a Shopify Express combined with Lulu to help you do that. You could use Ingram's tool called Aereo, that's AER.io, to help you do that. So yeah, there are definitely tools that will help you sell direct to reader. It's just really hard often to make those direct to reader sales. Janet says, is there a difference between a proposal and a synopsis? So yes, the difference between a proposal and a synopsis is that a book proposal is the business plan for a nonfiction book. A synopsis is generally a beginning to end summary of what happens in a narrative. So like a novel or a memoir will have a beginning to end synopsis that conveys the entire narrative arc and how the story ends. It's usually 500 to 1,000 words. A book proposal can be, easily 30 pages. It includes sample chapters and it's a business plan. Cynthia says, if you're writing an agent without a referral, what are some effective ways to connect with the agent in the opening of the letter? I actually have a blog post at my site about agent personalization in query letters. So I would suggest going to take a look at that. But I would just caution that so many people are using the same types of personalization that it's not really setting your query apart. So, saying things like, I read on your website, or I found you through Query Tracker aren't particularly meaningful. I think it gets more meaningful when you can point to a specific project the agent has represented, or the fact that you heard them speak recently, whether that's online or in person. Those sorts of things I think are more helpful. Sonia asks, what do I think of medium.com? She's thinking of doing some writing for this platform. So this is complicated because Medium has now been around for about a decade and has gone through many, many funding rounds. Even though it's founded by a Silicon Valley superstar, the business has pivoted so many times that most people have lost trust and confidence in it. Their latest pivot, which has been within the last year, has been to focus on creators. So basically like a Substack sort of model, because that's hot and trendy at the moment. They have really subverted the businesses of so many different writers and publications at this point that I would really question going to write for their platform, because at some point you're going to have the rug pulled out from underneath you. I do expect the site eventually to be acquired by some other company or to shut down, or who knows. There could be lots of ways that it ends that are both good and bad for writers. I don't think people really earn money through it unless they're in sort of formal arrangement with Medium or one of its publications. If you go writing for Medium just because you want them, on the chance that they might pay you, you're going to be disappointed. If you just want to have a pretty platform for posting some articles, okay, but at that point I would say, why not do that on Substack? Or why not do that on your own site? I don't think Medium is going to give you any traffic or visibility that you wouldn't already have otherwise. And because it's built on shifting sands, I think it just puts you in a more precarious position long-term. Let's see. Looking back at the questions here, where are we at? Yes, okay. We're getting towards the end here, so I want to try and choose some questions that have the broadest appeal. Let's see. Lots of questions I know I'm not going to get to. All right. Beatrice says, I've written a few chapters of my memoir, and I've had several essays and op-eds published, including one in the New York Times. Kudos to you. That's great. And she's got a couple blurbs from best-selling authors. That's also great. And she wants to get a book deal now. So can I do that, or do I need to wait until I'm done writing the book? What could be the best way to go about getting an agent now? I definitely sense some urgency around this, that you feel like now is the time. It makes me wonder if there's a timely angle here and you feel like the book will not be relevant long enough, or someone's going to take the wind out of your sails. I don't know. I always get a little nervous for people when they seem really urgent about this, because book publishing moves slow. You know, even if you got an agent today and a book deal tomorrow, you're probably 2 years away from having a book in your hand. So I just want to make it clear that no one in book publishing is in a big rush. Sometimes it's only authors who are in a rush. So, you know, I would just ask, you know, why the rush? But if you feel like this can't wait, by all means, put your work out on submission, but you need to write a decent proposal to go along with the sample chapters or partial manuscript that you have. I do have some guidance on my website about how to write a book proposal. There are lots of coaches and development editors out there who can also help you write one, although it can be expensive help, like in the 4 figures. But you can't sell that book with a partial without a proposal to go along with it. So that's what I would start working on now. And then you can shop that to agents. All right. Penny says, my publisher, which is an imprint of Simon & Schuster, has done nothing for me on my last book. Seems to have forgotten me, though I've done 4 books with them and the books have won awards. And I wonder about staying with them for my new book, which I haven't told them about yet, or should I go another path? Would I lose too much? Like, sounds like Penny doesn't want to give up foreign rights sales and having a sales team, which those are good questions to ask. Or would it be an idea to move up the food chain somehow, or to Random House? Or, well, my question here is, what does your agent think? I have to imagine that if you're with Simon & Schuster, you've probably got an agent. So does your agent, do they feel like you've been forgotten? Are they thinking it's time to switch houses? I would really strategize here with them and figure out, you know, what might be a better scenario for you, or if you're actually doing really well and maybe you're just feeling, I don't know, you know, comparison just results in misery. So if you're comparing yourself to other authors who you feel like are getting more attention or having more success, it can result in this feeling that your publisher isn't doing enough, or it's time for a change. And maybe it is. But please ask your agent for their take on this. And if you don't have an agent, you know, I'm not going to say stay where you are. It doesn't hurt to, you know, put out some feelers. But I think I would try and put in concrete terms, as concrete as possible, what you're going to get from another Big 5 imprint that you're not getting now. I think there's a little bit of grass is always greener. situation in these kinds of scenarios, and I don't think that things actually turn out that better when you switch, which I hate to say. So if you're just going from one big five to another big five, don't count on things being different unless you just have some real hard evidence that it will be better for you. And Penny confirms she doesn't have an agent, which, wow. So is it time to get one? If you've already got several books published with awards, maybe it's time to shop around for an agent. It's at least worth a shot, or maybe you don't want an agent. I don't know, but it's a very interesting issue. I wish you the best of luck. It's not easy to decide to change houses. If you really love your editor, I would hesitate more. But if you don't even feel like you've got an editor who champions you, I would lean towards a switch. Okay, so we're now at the top of the hour at 4 o'clock. I know I didn't get to all the questions, but there will be other opportunities, more Q&As in the future. I did want to do just a quick little screen share of upcoming sermons, which you can find listed at my site under Sunday Business Sermons. Next month, I'll be doing a little bit on negotiation, how to ask for more, then how I use Notion by popular request. And in September, I'll be talking about sponsors, advertisers, and affiliates, whether that's for your website, blog, newsletter, or something else entirely. So you can access all those at my website. I'm going to put the link into the chat here for easy access if my computer will cooperate. There we go. All right. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll look for you all online soon. Bye-bye.